Welcome back to the show. Joining me now for reaction to my interview with Lee Zeldin is Peter Schweizer, author of The Invisible Coup and president of the Government Accountability Institute. Peter, thank you so much for being here. Mr. Zeldin ended by invoking China. A big part of the current administration's goals is to restore the United States to energy dominance. And a lot of that is coming, I believe, at the expense of China. Tell us how you see this.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I mean, Donald Trump is really the first president, I would argue, since Ronald Reagan who has a grand strategy, which means he has a larger view of our competition with our chief rival. For Ronald Reagan, it was the Soviet Union. For Donald Trump, it's China. And if you look at a lot of the actions that he is taking, whether it's tariff policy, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's Iran, there's a common thread. All of those lead to China in some way. And I would argue his actions have really damaged China in a major way. Energy dominance is certainly a component of that, and China is reeling, and I think it's going to be a big factor when the president goes to China in just a couple of weeks.
This week, one of the big headlines was the UAE pulling out of OPEC. Explain to our audience why that is so significant.
Well, this is vital. The UAE is doing this primarily for their own national interests. They were having to curtail their oil production, their energy production, to meet the OPEC quotas, and it just didn't make sense. What this has done is really created the first major rupture in OPEC in a very, very long time. It's going to be good for the global energy markets. It's more competition, less restriction by OPEC. And you match the UAE's action with the rising domestic production in the United States, you have an energy market that is now dominated by the United States and its allies, or at least its friends. This is, again, to the detriment of China and to our competitors. Even Russia is caught in this now because Russia would try to negotiate agreements with OPEC on energy production. That will no longer be the case now that the UAE has been able to back out.
So this seems so clear when you lay it out like that, but the American people are somehow not buying it. The war in Iran, unbelievably unpopular. The president's approval ratings very low. Why is this so hard for people to understand that this is a very America-first agenda?
Well, I think part of it is, look, we live in a news cycle. You live in this news cycle where it's immediate, right? We want to know immediately what's going on. There's an uptick in prices. That is bad. The bottom line is this. The consensus of all the experts, people like David Albright, who's been covering Iran nuclear program for a very long time, is Iran was 3 to 6 months away from acquiring a nuclear weapon. And we are ostensibly a superpower. Can we not, deal with the consequence for a few months of disruptions and increase in energy prices to accomplish a vitally important national security goal, which is to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons? If we can't do that, I would say we might as well fold up our tents and go home. So it's really looking, I think, medium and long term, and I do think that the American people will appreciate it. Same thing during the Cold War. They didn't like a lot of things that Reagan did, but sure, they loved it when the final results came, and they championed him because of that. And I think we're going to see the same case when it comes to Donald Trump.
This exact question came up in a fiery exchange between Congressman Ro Khanna and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War. Let's have that.
You know how much it will cost Americans in terms of their increased cost in gas and food over the next year because of the Iran war?
I would simply ask you what the cost is of an Iranian nuclear bomb.
I'm going to give you that opportunity.
I would simply ask you what the... You're playing gotcha questions about domestic things. I'm not...
You're saying it's a gotcha question to ask what it's going to be in terms of the increased cost of gas?
Why won't you answer what it costs to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear bomb?
What I find so funny about this exchange is not only that in 2022, gas was much higher under Joe Biden and Ro Khanna had no problem with it, but that Ro Khanna himself, let's pull this up, has a net worth of $230 million, represents one of the richest, if not the richest congressional districts in America, Silicon Valley, is one of the top congressional stock traders. And he's sitting here sort of concerned trolling over the cost of gas as if his constituents or himself ever feels that, while they had no problem with, the war in Ukraine, which drove costs, especially at the pump, much higher.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And of course, the war with Ukraine happened because of American weakness. Russia did not go into Ukraine when Donald Trump was president. They went when Joe Biden was president. Gas prices were higher. What Donald Trump is doing is trying to deal with a problem before it gets much, much, much worse. Imagine if Iran announces they have multiple nuclear weapons and the world has to try to deal with it. It's tragic what we're having to deal with now, the risk to our allies, the risk to our fighting men and women. But this is the best option given the challenge that we're facing. And I think history will show that down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very much to the president's credit. He knew this was a political risk, and he still took it. Is this going to cost the GOP the midterms?
It might, but I don't think it's going to be exactly the way people are tailoring it to be. I think by the fall, people are going to have a clearer picture. The situation in the Middle East is going to be stabilized. But yes, you have to deal with the short-term political implications. But to everybody who says that Donald Trump is an unprincipled politician who's just trying to cater to the masses, this is yet another example of it's not the case. He's said since the 1980s, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Hillary Clinton has said it. Barack Obama has said it. Donald Trump is the only one to step up and actually deal with it based on solid intelligence that everyone pretty much concurs is accurate, that they were 3 to 6 months away from acquiring weapons. So he's taken this action as great political risk to himself. He should be rewarded for that, not penalized because he's trying to do the right thing.
Peter Schweizer, please come back very, very soon. God bless you and protect you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.